it's not so much about questions at times. Because, we are like busy thinking, oh, what's going to be the next question? What do I need to ask now? It's not about that. If you're just able to be there, notice subtle shifts in energy, subtle shifts in the body language. Oh, that smile that crossed your face, all of those things, if we just played back, I think it can make a world of a difference.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you have joined us from. I am Richa Chadha, PCC, ACTC mentor, facilitator, and a Coacharya alum. So I welcome you all. And if you could please let us know in the chat where you are joining us from while we are getting started, it would be great. So, I'd love to welcome you all today. We are exploring how empathy allows us to create coaching spaces where the client leads themselves, okay, where their pace, performance, and voice comes first. So, in this session, we'll explore how that builds deeper ownership in our coaching conversation. All right, so before we move ahead, I'm seeing people from Argentina, Bay Area, California. All right, so I missed saying that I am joining from the Bay Area, California as well. So lovely seeing some folks from this side as well. Okay, so before we begin our conversation today and I introduce you guys to our amazing panelists, how about I invite you to join into a brief moment of stillness? Let's go inwards. If you're comfortable, please close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath. And as you exhale, gently let go of your coach self, the professional hat, the doing mode. Now think of a moment, recent, distant, doesn't matter, when you truly felt heard, not fixed, not advised, just heard. Let that memory rise. Maybe it was a friend, a mentor, a stranger, or maybe it was just yourself. What made that moment matter? What did you feel in your body? What shifted for you after being received that way? Now bring your attention to the voice within you, the one that often knows but doesn't always get space. What does that voice need in order to speak freely? What kind of space helps it feel safe, powerful, and trusted? When you're ready, open your eyes and drop one word or phrase in the chat, something that describes the kind of space where your inner voice feels at home. A word or phrase that makes you feel that your inner voice is being heard. It feels at home. Openness, calmness, not judged. Yeah, trust. I was going to say trust, authenticity. Beautiful. So, this reading what you guys are sharing, it reminds me how deeply we all long to be met where we are, exactly where we are. And I've noticed for myself that when I feel heard, my defenses lower, my body softens, and then I can finally hear myself too. So I'll post a question in the chat for you guys. And before we put our coaching hats on, a little personal question for you all. Can you recall a time when someone really saw you, didn't steer, didn't advise, just held space? How did that impact your clarity or motivation? And while you guys are doing that, Anshu and Smita, I'd love for you both to introduce yourselves briefly. And then, just as humans, not as coaches, what does leading with empathy mean for you both?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in, and thank you, Richa. For that short meditation. It really feels calm and energized. So, a brief introduction. I'm a coach, a PCC coach, a team coach, and also an educator at Coacharya. I wear dual, hats. I also work with Coacharya as director, sales and administration. So, to your question on Sorry, was there a question that you asked after that, like after the introduction? Can
Not
you?
as coaches, as human beings, what does leading with empathy mean for you?
Okay, all right. Leading with empathy for me, it's like stepping into someone's shoe and connecting with their emotional reality before trying to really connecting with their maybe the logical reality.
Mm,
I would say. Also, it's like there is no rush to make the other person feel light about their challenge or their situation, but to just embrace that uncertainty. So, yeah, that's what comes up.
beautiful. Anshu, you're on mute.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. I'm Anshu Bhargava, trainer, facilitator, and yes, PCC coach as well. Uh, Sharing a little bit about the empathy part, I think, and removing the coaching part of it. So, I think it's more about how can you just be there for someone, hold the space for them. And I was just reflecting on as you were, saying this question, Richa, I was just thinking the face which came to me was my mom, because it's like she would just kind of read my face at times, and I would be surprised how does she know if I'm not feeling well, if I have some pain, ache, and she would just like, oh, is that what you're feeling? And then that's like something which is empathy for me, because at times, you wonder, you tell your friends or somebody, you have no empathy, and you're just like having that argument. So it's all about how can we really feel what the other person is going through. So I think for
Mm,
me, that's what empathy is all about.
yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. In fact, I remember joining Coacharya, and one of the first early sessions, I would say, was learning the difference between sympathy and empathy. And Ram narrated how Cindy describes the difference between the sympathy and empathy. And if Cindy, you're joining me, please correct if something I've missed. So if I remember correctly, if somebody is down the well or a pothole and they're crying, you go, you jump, you sit with them and you cry with them. That's sympathy. Of course, you're feeling the pain and you're kind of there with them, but is that helping any of you? No. And empathy is while you are on the top, you can see the pain and you support them get out of that situation or whatever they are in. So that really stayed with me. And for me, if I say leading with empathy, I always feel it's about being deeply present, especially when you are uncomfortable. I would say, especially then, when you're uncomfortable and still you're deeply present. That's what leading with empathy means for me. And again, I remember, Anshu, as you're saying, when I was a child, I think 8 or 9 years old, I remember my grandmother was grieving the loss of somebody dear. And I loved her so much, but I didn't know what to do or how to comfort her, how to help her. So she would be sitting in silence and I would just go sit with her. I was struggling to find words. I would just go sit with her. And one evening, it happened for 2, 3 days. And one evening, she just took my hand and she said, "You don't have to say anything. I know that you're here." So that I didn't know what it meant then, but reflecting upon it, I feel like maybe that was empathy, just being present with her. Okay, so moving into our next segment, the first one actually, we often talk about empathy as being the heart of coaching. But even small words, our tonality, our body language, they can either open or close the space for true client ownership, right? So I'll pop this question in the chat for our wonderful coaches who've joined us. Where in coaching session do you feel empathy matters most, right? And to our panelists here, how have you seen empathy impact client ownership in practice? Like, especially when the coach had the best intentions. I know we always do. Can you share moments when you realized you unintentionally missed the mark with empathy, or you thought you were doing it, but maybe it wasn't?
Mm. Uh, such a beautiful question to reflect on, Richa. It's like, though we say that we as coaches and as we are building our hours and working towards our as mastery in coaches, we know there is a very stark difference between mentoring and coaching, and we try and segregate these two hats. However, some unknowingly sometimes the expert bias might just come in the way. So I am an ex-banker. I have worked with a bank for 10 years, and then it's a career shift that has happened to me. So in the banking parlance, it's always about what really gets rewarded is you having the solution. So solutions are rewarded, not being in that state of confusion and not knowing. So I think that's really like the bias of expertise, which may just come, and it's not like a direct. We don't say, okay, why don't you do this? But in a very in a leading way, the question goes, which definitely can come in the way of client. It's unintentional. And then about the time pressure, I sometimes we really feel that, okay, it's just going to be agreed, the agreement is for 40 minutes or 45 minutes. Or I know new coaches, they struggle a lot when it is about doing a coaching conversation in a 30-40 minutes. And then there is a pressure of time where you're really rushing to complete in the agreed time. That can be one of the reason where unintentionally um, it comes in the way. The third thing, which I think is about the rescue impulse. So we
Mm,
want to be, like saving someone, or really feeling that the ownership is with us to be solving the problem of the other. And again, like, while we are learning this art and science of coaching, unknowingly sometimes it does come in. I think as coaches, the work that we are constantly on is solutions are overrated. Can we
yeah.
work on being comfortable with that unknown? So choosing to see the client in that moment of uncertainty versus choosing to see the client with certain answers.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. Sometimes when we are mentoring, we see that, and I'm guilty of doing that as well in the early days, that we don't offer a solution directly, but we are indirectly nudging the client towards something.
Mm.
I think a lot of people will resonate with that.
Yeah, it's not uncommon.
Yeah, yeah.
Just to add my thoughts to it, and there's this one particular instance which comes to my mind, and this was in our peer coaching session where I was sharing something, and the coach reflected back, and she was sharing that you just hyperventilated, taking that deep breath in, and that's it. That's just what the coach noticed in me.
Mm,
So for a moment, I was taken aback because uh, that just kind of made me like think that, oh yeah, that really means something to me. The whole topic kind of became different. I suddenly understood where it's pressurizing me, where the stress is coming from. So in
mm,
that moment of that one breath, it was like a whole new world opening up. So it made me reflect that it's not so much about questions at times. Because, we are like busy thinking, oh, what's going to be the next question? What do I need to ask now? It's not about that. If you're just able to be there, notice subtle shifts in energy, subtle shifts in the body language. Oh, that smile that crossed your face, all of those things, if we just played back I think it can make a world of a difference. And the other thing is also like the point of, when you are thinking that, the client is bringing out so many things and one after the other, and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to talk about now? Where does this, conversation go? So again, asking the client, what's resonating with you? You've mentioned point A, B, and C. Which one of these should we take it ahead? So I think it's more about that resonance, not with what I think as a client I should be asking, but more as to what the client feels is important for them. So it's more about checking that resonance. I think that's where the empathy would play out, not about my agenda, but okay, what's the client's agenda? So that's what my thought would be on this.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So, Richa, just to, that's a beautiful point Anshu made. Just adding this, the coaching mindset, it so beautifully connects, right? Which says,
Mm,
acknowledges that clients are responsible for their own choices. I mean, it's as simple a statement as that. However, to be holding that space and asking questions in such a way where, we acknowledge that the client is responsible for that the choices is being so much to show about empathy.
yeah. And I often say, like, coaching is a journey of learning, but there is a lot of unlearning also that we have to do. And culturally, also, I feel like, especially coming from the Indian subcontinent, I feel that we are humans also, and more so in our country, I feel that we are all problem solvers. We are all like fixers. We all have our fixing hat on. So, but when you are in coaching, I think that was the biggest unlearning that I did. Like, not your problem to solve. The client knows what they want. They know their life, they know their problems, and they will get it sorted. Just give them the space. Just be present with them. And I remember a session early in the days when the client said something and the connection was there, but they didn't say it. I did it. I reflected on that insight and I made that connection. And all I remember is like few years back, but I still remember the client said, "Oh, you made the connection before I did." And I was like, gosh, that was not my connection to make. And I think that moment, something shifted in me, and I realized that while we are excited about, hey, that's happening for you, but that's not my space, right? And
Yeah.
somebody has shared in the chat as well. Andy shares that an explanation from Draven comes to my mind. He said, imagine you need to learn how to ride a bike. Yes, you can read, look videos, and more, but and this represents coaching. You can only learn it by doing it your own. Yes. You can
Mhm.
teach people, you can ask people to read or see videos, but they need to be there out there to do their own learning. Okay, let's talk about acknowledgement then. I think, Anshu, you brought it up. So we all want to acknowledge and affirm our clients, but acknowledgement isn't always empowering. Sometimes it's subtly evaluative as well, as we see in a lot of maybe in our coaching in the early days or the coaches we mentor. So I've popped a question in the chat. When you acknowledge a client, what guides what you say and how you say? Drop a word or phrase, whatever comes to mind. We would love to see your responses. And Anshu and Smita, how does the way we acknowledge clients impact their sense of autonomy?
Mm. When you ask this question, what really comes up as a strong competency, I'm just connecting it to the competencies. So it's about the trust and
Mm,
safety. Like the word acknowledgement is not exactly the same as appreciating or agreeing, but acknowledgement in itself is such a powerful word where immediately the client will feel that, my coach really gets me, my coach really gets me and the situation that I am in. It's not to say that whether it's right or wrong or whatever. So the way I think acknowledgement can really happen is, just using the language of the client words, like just exactly reflecting, or maybe just saying that, the energy, Richa, earlier you used that word energy. It's so beautiful to be just saying that, you observed some energy shift, right? and really naming what you're sensing. So I'm hearing some shift in your voice that will make them feel to say that, okay, you're not making meaning out of it, but you're really able to see that there is
Just calling
something.
it out.
Exactly, some
Mm.
shift happening and some reflection is happening. And more so, just acknowledging their process. Again, I'm picking up on what you said earlier, is to meet the client for where they are. Like, am I able to acknowledge them for their process? It can be, it can be anywhere. It might not match with mine, but am I able to acknowledge their own process? And even like, if it is saying things like, okay, you you really take time to feel into this rather than rushing to decide something, right? So
Mm.
the feelings and all of the energy, if all of that can be acknowledged, I think, the trust with the client can really be built. So I'm really connecting this with the acknowledgement piece. Of course, it's in many other competencies, but I think the most important is really to build that trust with the client.
Yeah, and it's really important, Smita, as you said, that we have the best intentions and we are kind of saying that, like, hey, that was great, and like this and that with the best intentions. But in the process, I think sometimes we come out as evaluative or like we're grading the client.
Yeah, like
Rather,
bringing our own interpretations into the picture, which really may become like a barrier for their exploration and their process.
yeah.
Yeah, I would so agree to that. It's like we say that, you should not be judgmental in this conversation, but at times it's so easy to fall into judgments, especially when it's, something like a right and wrong, something that you feel as a coach very strongly about. So it's very easy to kind of, try and mold the conversation in that direction. What do you feel? What do you think is the right thing to do? And, guilty on the fact of, being solution oriented. So always, that jump to, okay, so what's going to be the solution? What's the action that you're going to take? Hold on. That's something which I tell myself, and I think over with practice over the years, that's started helping. That just hold on to acknowledge what's happening. Are there insights showing up? Is there some learning? Is there some shift happening for them? So just allowing that to happen and acknowledging that bit before we jump into, okay, this is a solution which you could do, or why don't you, take this as an action? So I think it's more about following them and allowing the client to lead. I think that's something which really helps. So that bias which we may have, avoiding those, putting that on the back seat and allowing them to take the lead in terms of what is it that they are seeking. And also sometimes, asking questions and, how would you like to acknowledge yourself? Sometimes it's easy to pick on, okay, great, what a, deep thinking you've done, or you've, come up with beautiful insights. But just asking, keeping it open-ended. How do you want to acknowledge yourself? And listening in that, okay, what do they pick out of it? So I think that's more like putting it back to them rather than taking the lead there and saying it's great to appreciate, because in a way that's encouraging. But at the same time, even what we are encouraging comes from our own filters, that, okay, this is what I think is good. So that good and bad, perfect, all of those words come very easily. So I think it's more about allowing the client to lead, even when we are trying to acknowledge them. That's what I would think on this.
Yeah.
And Richard, just one example here
Mm-hmm.
again based on Anshu's, something really triggers. So it's like our own frameworks that we use. Say, for example, the client is talking about confidence, and immediately we put our framework to be saying, okay, that looks like a classic example of imposter syndrome. Now, that I feel that, such a barrier. That's my sense. Maybe, at the back of the mind, I'm a human, I'm sitting, I'm feeling, I'm listening to the client, and I'm making my own meaning out of it. However, how do I show up to be managing in the way that I would like to acknowledge, rather than put my own frameworks or my own words around, what I'm listening and understanding?
Yeah. Yeah, and listening to you both, I felt like And not that I didn't know before, but all of these competencies and everything is so beautifully connected. Like Anshu, when you were sharing, I heard presence. Smita, you mentioned about listening, all of these things, right? So when you're listening at the third level, you are automatically giving the client that space. You're leading with empathy. And then when you're managing your own emotions, your own biases, you're again leading with empathy. So it is all so beautifully interconnected. So it is very easy, Anshu, as you pointed, because we're all humans. It is very easy for us to be evaluative, to be grading, and to be putting our words to it. Oh, that was a great insight. Oh, that felt like so much like you've empowered this, you've done that. So while that is encouraging, and you're right, that does encourage people, but that doesn't solve the purpose. And as coaches, we mostly stay in the neutral zone, right? Because if we feel like, oh, I should appreciate the client for this, you may not want to appreciate, and you may disagree with the client at some times, and you may want to say something else to them. So I think it's always, and that was again a bit of unlearning that to remain in the neutral zone. It's not our thing to grade or to evaluate. So instead, I'm learning to ask something like, what was that like for you? Right? Rather than saying that, oh, that was great. What was that like for you? Right? Just allowing them to take all the space and do their own evaluations. So I feel that when we do that, it centers their meaning, not my evaluation of it. And it keeps space open for that truth, for their truth, and not my version of it.
Yeah.
And there is some interesting things in the chat as well. So Lakshmi says that we always think about our next question to client rather than being there with the client in that moment. What do you guys say about this?
Yeah, it's tough. It's always a struggle because, you are wanting to, do the best, like you said, have the best intent. So you're thinking, okay, what's going to be that perfect question which is going to illuminate everything for them? So you are, in a way, finding out, okay, what's going to be the next direction. But I think it's more about remaining in that unconditional positive regard. Like you said, not evaluating, not judging, but just giving them that space that, yeah, whatever you're sharing, I'm there to hold that for you. So I think it's more about observing and being there rather than figuring out what's the next question, because that's a tough one. Yes, always a struggle.
And Dan says, learn to be comfortable in silence. Yes, sorry,
Yeah,
Smita, you were saying
yeah.
something.
No, I was just saying that, the competency about presence, which Anshu said earlier, the one of the sub competencies is about being responsive to client. Now what if based on what Lakshmi said, it's like if at the back of my mind I'm really working on framing my question, how am I going to be responsive to the client because I've lost my listening, I've lost my presence? How is that going to really impact on the question that you are going to ask? Is it going to be responsive to the client? So then at the end of the day we say, uh, your role is to serve the agenda of the client and not your own agenda, because I also want my question to be powerful and all of that. But
The
if I am,
markers.
yeah, if I am just coming in my own way of working on that powerful question.
Mm. Yeah, and the masters of the art of coaching, they say that your question shouldn't even be there until you've heard the last word of the client. So, how can you stay present, be mindful of where the client is, and just dance in the moment with them, right? Not think about the next question. And I remember in one of my early mentoring sessions, and I asked a question to Ram that what happens, like, let's say the client has been going on for 15-20 minutes. What happens if I don't remember the first part where I felt something important came up, but then I felt that in the middle as well, and then something in the last as well, and I don't remember? So he's like, it's not your place to remember. It is the client's thing. If you remember that something came up, well and good. You can point that out. I heard this, I heard this. What feels important for you to discuss? But if it doesn't, then if it is important for the client, they will bring it up again. So don't be stuck in that moment in the past. And this had been such a great game changer. And when I'm mentoring people and they ask me the same question, I always fall back on this advice that if it is important for the client, they will bring it again. Make sure you are present, you are listening. So, and
Yep. Great point
eh,
there.
yeah, thank you. So, this is a perfect segue into questioning. So, what does a question that supports autonomy sound like to you? Let us hear from people in the chat. And Anshu and Smita, how do you use questions in ways that support client rather than steer? And if you can share an example with us when a shift in your question helped the client.
Hmm. Uh, Recently I was just reading through a transcript and listening. It was a mentoring conversation. And the client there said that with all of multiple things happening in life, it looks really overwhelming, looks stressful, and feels like drowning.
Mm,
Yeah. And this is, that stage where the goal setting is yet to happen. It's at a very exploratory stage. So just 10 minutes in the conversation, and the client is talking, and just ends the sharing with this statement. And I'm looking at that question, and I'm just thinking that, like, in order for the coach, and it's just the 10 minutes in the conversation, right? So you're building that trust with your client. You're really connecting with your client, and what they would really bring up in the conversation for exploration, and then, an awareness, and then an insight. So at this stage, the coach goes like, okay, what is it that you would like to walk away from today's conversation? And the client is absolutely, not knowing anything, because at that stage it's like, we often, teach in our class about the brown water, where the and if for the audience, if you're aware of the brown water analogy, one of our MCC coaches had explained that, saying, okay, when sometimes there is water shortage and you open the tap, all you see is dirty water. We do not put the container and collect that water, but keep the container away and let the water flow, and start collecting only when the water clears up. So
mm,
here is this, a stage where the client is still unpacking, and the coach goes about asking as to what looks like a takeaway. It's a very, our agenda. Basically, that question is the agenda of the coach to find out the goal of the session. The agenda of the client is still to unpack. So that really, I feel, comes in the way again, if as a question that comes in the way for exploration. I'm also thinking of, the binary questions that we ask. The client is really talking about multiple things and zeroes down in either this or that, and they're sharing both. And the coach goes like, okay, do you want to pick this or that? Right? And who knows, past 15, 20 minutes, the client was unpacking. Out of that unpacking, something really as a third option
yeah.
emerged, which is really, maybe combining these two, or maybe totally different from these two options as of now. So am I limiting the client by asking that or question? Do you want to do this or that? Also, again, I'm thinking of, how can questions really support the client. So we asked very simple, the what else question, right? Like, what else is possible here? But again, that comes with, it cannot be overused. I know of a client who said, this coach, I don't want this coach, because this coach comes and asks only what else. And this is like, if I have to keep asking myself what else, I can just do it on my own. I don't need a coach for that. So
Mm,
knowing when to ask that what else question. And I'm just, reminded of another example, and then about the criteria for, what would make this feel right for you, instead of saying what's the,
mm,
smart choice. So the smart is our addition to the conversation, right? If at all I need to make choice in my worldview, it has to be like the word smart has to be there. But if I ask the client the same thing, maybe again, I'm coming in the way. So instead of asking what smart choice, can I just go like, okay, what would make this feel right for you? Yeah. So yeah, these are some of my reflections.
Beautiful. Thank you, Smita.
Interesting examples there, Smita. And while reflecting, I'm just thinking of one of the situations which, I'm in correlation with the questions, which was around, career decisions that, okay, I have this particular stream of business and this particular stream of business, what to go with, again, an either or kind of situation. So, what my reflection on the questions is that it's very easy to get lost sometimes in the what of the situation. And especially if you are coming from a corporate background, if you have a little bit of business insights, you're totally okay. I'm almost getting into mentoring. I would love to, solve this problem for you today. This is the pro and this is the con, and this is the business you should go for. So I think that's where what's important is to ask questions which are going a little bit more in the depth, not just the surface level problem or the presenting problem. You go to a doctor and, I have fever, so they'll give you that medicine for fever, but what's the underlying issue? That's what the tests help you find. So there is that inner conflict due to some reason. And further into this conversation, there was a point where the client talks about the purpose. This is the purpose, and this is, something which is very, very important for this particular line of business. And that's where the immediate thought is that, okay, if this is the purpose, how does it align with you as a person? What else is important for you as a person? What are some of the values? What are some of the beliefs that you hold very close to you? Because as soon as I look at the situation, it seems very straightforward that go for business line A or business line B. But what I also sense is that below the surface, there is that inner conflict which is going on, where somewhere either the belief is there or there is some purpose which is aligning to you as a person. So that's where the who questions come, where you start asking a little bit about, okay, how's it aligning with you as a person? What is it that you hold important? What are some of the things that you're telling yourself when you're choosing this line of business or that? And also, relating to growth, because as we evolve in life, we change. So the person that I was maybe 5 years back is not the person I'm today. Maybe 5 years down the line, I will not be the same person. So maybe this line of business appealed to you earlier on, but now that you are a different person, what is important for you today? So I think that's again something which changes over a period of time. And going forward, what is going to be something which is important for you? So I think these are some of the things where questions can play a big role, where you take them a little bit below the surface and ask those questions. Because sometimes you will find that just as you are getting into those who questions, the entire situation changes. Because the line of questioning takes you in a different direction where the person realizes, yeah, this no longer makes sense to me because I have changed my thought. My outlook towards life has changed. So it's more about there putting those questions which explore and maybe even asking them, would you want us to explore this line of business first or that?
Mhm.
So it's not either or, but it's more about this before that. So you are doing a holistic discussion with them. And you're asking questions both on the surface as well as what is lying below. So that's my thought on questions.
Yeah. And a couple of things really stood out for me. Smita, you talked about close-ended questions, like, giving the client the binary options, two options. And that really spoke to me because I feel that sometimes as coaches we tend to be stuck into what is in front of us. We don't make that effort to see what's behind that and to give the client that third option which didn't even exist. They didn't know that it existed, we didn't know that it existed, but still we give the client that option. So I feel that opens a world of autonomy if we do that and we ask the client, instead of what would you like to choose, A or B, you would be like, what would you like to move forward with, rather than asking them to choose between A and B.
Yeah.
And Anshu, you talked about the what and the who. I believe that we some most of the times, or sometimes, we tend to stay on the surface of the water, and the change or the impacts that we are planning, or that the way we want to support our client, really happens when we go deeper, and that's where the who starts coming into picture more. So
Yeah.
I find I find these subtle shifts, like both when we talk of binary options, what and the who, and even the words, that they play a huge, huge impact. Like earlier, I would ask my clients, what is stopping you? I made that subtle shift of changing it to what do you need in order to move forward? So it subtly shifts the focus from deficit to a resource, right? So I felt that it was a tiny tweak, but it tells the client you're not broken, you're becoming, you're in the process.
Yeah.
Such a great sharing. Yeah, wonderful, Richard. Really loved what you said about choice of words, really, giving a different outcome. There is a question here by Sayan
Mm,
on the chat.
I was gonna get that, yes.
Yeah, go ahead if you
No, no,
have a.
no, no, no. Please, I was gonna ask you guys. Please go ahead, Smita.
So, Sayan, not at all controversial. It's not a controversial question. I think it's a very, very good point to say that, we really feel that the client has not yet opened up or unpacked and not saying because of some reason, right? Maybe there is anxiety, maybe there is fear, maybe there is a fear of, the coach maybe judging or whatever may be the reason. And what exactly, I just, asked a question saying, do you want to take a chance of taking this question and saying it differently? I think and what he exactly said this is what can be an option where you drop the me there. So instead of saying, do you want to, I would like to read this question. Is there anything you're yet to share with me? So the me there is the coach, and that becomes like, again, I mean, the entire conversation and the process is not for the coach. It's really for the client. So something like, okay, is there something that you would like to tell yourself? Is there anything more that you would like to tell yourself? Can be an option sign, or like exactly to what you said, just drop the me there.
One more thing, on this one, when we were talking about staying on the surface or going deeper, there's always like sometimes, the client knows what they need to do. You need to go to the gym, so you want to go, but it's still not happening. The habit is not sticking for some reason. So there is always something below the surface which is going on. So I think it's more about when you start exploring what's below the surface, then that's where the client understands, okay, this is what is going on. This is where the conflict in values or conflict in some inner conversations that you might be having, the self talk might be there. So I think it's important that rather than jumping, let's quickly come to the solution, come to the accountability, let's fix this problem, stay with exploring it further till the time they find within themselves where the conflict is emerging from.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
And if you look at the question here again, Anshu and Richa, so the next question: is there anything you are hesitating to share? And I would ask you to
Mm.
reflect on what Richa said about earlier about being resourceful, or whether what was the word, Richa, you said? Deficit. So whether it is coming from a deficit space or from a resource space,
Mm.
something which can be kept in mind while you are framing this question. So
So here, in a way, we are kind of labeling the client as they are hesitant, right?
yeah, I mean, it might
So
just sound as judgmental as
yeah.
well. Um, so maybe we can try finding for a neutral word rather than something which may look like judgmental.
What is below the surface? What is it that we are not exploring? Something like this. And if the client feels like sharing with us, well and good. If not, it's for them to go down and explore it for themselves. But what we are doing by this is scratching the surface for them and asking them to go deeper. It doesn't matter whether they share it with us or not. And I'll quickly talk about the word me as well, Smita, as Sayan also mentioned. So when we ask a lot of me things, help me understand. I am curious. Can you tell me more? So when we ask a lot of me questions, we are making it about ourselves. It is not, the client is not in our service to do us a favor or to help us understand or to solve our curiosity. So again, using the subtle power of the words that we can use, I would ask something like, what would happen if you did this? rather than help me understand if you did this, what would happen, or something like that. Just being more curious, but not making it about ourselves.
Yeah. Just
So,
expanding on your question. Sorry, Anshu, were you
yeah,
saying?
no.
So just expanding on that question of, the below the surface thing, I can just bring myself in the sense of saying, I sense there is something below the surface here. I sense,
Yeah,
and and take the permission of the client to be saying, like,
yeah,
do you sense to what do you want to explore, uh, that? So that is not wrong, where I am bringing my sense. The client might just go like, oh no, you're not sensing it right. And it's okay. We're not attached to the sensing. But however, because our own intuitions are at play as well, without sounding judgmental, how can we being neutrally and sharing something like
yeah. And as coaches, we can totally be vulnerable. We can totally be wrong. So I would just sometimes tell them, hey, can I share an observation? Like as you said, Smita, take their permission, get their buy-in. And then I would say, I don't know, but I'm sensing something beneath the surface that we are not exploring. How does that resonate with you? Or what are you sensing? And then they could accept or reject it. This is a much more empathy. Sticking to the theme of empathy, I feel this shows much more empathy, even in our words and tone. So moving to the next part, which is how do we design actions and accountability? When it comes to action and accountability, it's easy for the coach sometimes to take the wheel, and we want to help the client succeed, definitely. But in doing so, we may take ownership away at times. So, my question here for our coaches is how do you support your clients in designing accountability that stays with them, not you? And to our panelists here, what helps you hold space for client-led goal setting without inserting your agenda, even subtly?
Yeah, I'm again, these examples are popping up as I'm just reflecting on these questions, Richa. So the client says, a client is talking about a topic about leaving a job, and says, I'm unsure, I'm not sure.
Mm,
So I'm thinking about leaving my job, but I am not sure. And when we think of this statement, and we think of, what could be a question from the space of empathy can look like, and what can be that question which will look from the space of without empathy, say, for example. And maybe the audience here, if you're also, along with me, listening to this statement and reflecting on what would you ask, feel free to just put in the chat box, and I'll just share in a minute after I see one or two reflections from you. Oh, okay. So maybe, Richa, you already shared a question, right? So I might just give some space for them to think of this answer. Tone is something which I struggle. Okay. Let me just expand on the answer for this. So with empathy, I really think that, okay, coach might just go like, I notice you've been sitting in with this decision for a while. What is it like to hold this uncertainty? What it is like to hold this uncertainty. They've been talking for the past few minutes on this. And maybe, like, when I'm thinking of how would a question look like without empathy, so I am just, so attached to the agenda, and for them to get the answer is like, okay, let's make a pro and con list, and just work on, for both. Let's work on that. Maybe that might just help you. It may not be as direct the same thing.
mm,
We can just say it in another way, which leads to be saying that, okay, maybe, just taking the pros and the cons may help you to get an answer for this dilemma that you are in.
mm.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of this example and reflecting on this as with your question. Anshu, maybe you can just go
Yeah,
ahead and something
sure.
like.
So, just reflecting on the fact, that we all have preferences. So, at times, we start operating from our own preferences. So, like things like, the client is talking about, oh, I need to go to the gym 3 times. And if I have a preference of having an accountability partner, my question could be that, okay, so how would you hold yourself accountable with a gym buddy, maybe? So, in a way, you are almost having a leading question. You are, in a way, nudging them in the direction of maybe what's your own preference as, a person. So it may be something different for them. For them, it may be just about setting an alarm in the morning and, reminding themselves that, okay, I need to go to the gym, or maybe keeping their shoes close to their bed, taking out their gym clothes. So it may be different for different individuals. So I think what's important is like keeping it open-ended, fairly open-ended, in terms of how would you like to hold yourself accountable. If we are asking that question, they could say anything. I want to, journal every morning and every evening. Did I go? I want a visual tracker on the, screen so that I can mark myself that every day I go to gym, I'm going to tick myself off. It could be any of those ways. And what's important is not, okay, are they doing it as per what we prefer, or are they doing what is preferable to them? Because that's what they're going to stick with. I mean, we may try as much from our end that, we make it our agenda and we want them to be successful. And after 1 week, when we have the session, we want all 7 ticks that, I went to the gym every day of the week. But I think it's important that we allow it, put it back to them, allowing them to take the lead as to what works best for them. And that's exactly what's going to work because that's what's coming out from within, not something that we are superimposing as, from outside as a coach. Although we want the same thing, we want success for them. But success is guaranteed more if they take the lead. And sometimes you can just sense it in their voice. There are times when, the person would say, I don't need any accountability measure. I know I've decided now I'm going to do it. And you can just sense like there's so much determination there that maybe that's it. That's just what they needed. So I think it's also about that trust in them that, whatever they're picking for themselves is the best way, which is going to bring results for them.
Yeah. And I've noticed sometimes what coaches do is ask, like, who might help you in doing that? So even though it's an open-ended question, who might help you? But then to your point, Anshu, maybe it's not a who, it's just a what. They need a phone, they need an alarm. So how can we open that question even further and just ask, how would you like to hold yourself accountable to this? And this in itself presents them a world of options that they can choose, right? And honestly, it frees me too. That gives the power back to them. I don't have any role. I've asked the client if they need me to check in with them. They could just say that rather than offering myself upfront. How can I help you? That's again limiting their options, right? So the idea is to trust the client's growth, and it doesn't rely any of my monitoring. They've been doing well throughout their life, and they will do well without me. So I don't need to impose myself on them. So we are nearing the end, and but I really want to leave some time for one last check-in. So let's check with our audience. What's one insight or intention you're walking away with about supporting client ownership with empathy? We would love to hear your thoughts. And to our amazing panelists, how would you like to close our conversation today? As I like to say to all my coaching clients towards the end, or what are you taking away from our insightful, beautiful conversation?
I think empathy is at definitely at the core of any conversation. I mean, it's not just as a coaching conversation. Um, to meet the client where they are and to build that trust. I think every competency really plays there for all conversations, whether it is presence, whether it is listening, and whether it is about accountability. And since we have a few minutes, Richa, if it's okay, I can just expand on that gym example Anshu gave.
Yeah.
So just think of a client who talks about, various options of going to the gym at the beginning of the conversation, and you kind of, agree that you're going to evaluate on some 3, 4 options for your fitness. And the client reflected and shared with you that I'm very claustrophobic and I don't like to go to gym. That's the sharing that they did at the start of the conversation. And while they're now planning their action steps, you see that they again picked up on gym as an option for their fitness. And the coach goes like, you reflected saying you're claustrophobic, and I see that you have picked it up again here while we are coming to the end of the session and you're finalizing your action steps. And the client goes like, oh, you know what? I have, in the past 50 minutes of this conversation, while I know that this is a challenge with me, which is a workable, it's not like, I would die being claustrophobic. I would want to count on that because I really want to lose that weight. And I'm now so much in awareness and the importance of for this fitness for me that I'm changing the narrative around how I was seeing a gym and claustrophobia. So something really evolved for the client there, right? And I think that is where the coach really partners with the client would be feeling so grateful that you remembered that from the conversation, and you're placing it
Yeah.
them for them to reflect on. Yeah.
Thank you, Smita.
Thank you. And I see some beautiful reflections here, Richa, on the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Active
Exploring
listening.
clients who, then what, maintaining presence. Dharamveer says active listening, evoking awareness, use of words. Thank you for sharing. Others, please share. What are you taking away from our conversation?
Yeah,
Anshu?
these are all great points. And I think for me, the topic of empathy is, something that, it's like, it's not just about coaching. I think all personal relations or all professional relations, empathy becomes like really important. And it's been also one of the things that I've struggled with initially as to, how do you bring in empathy? Because there's so much to do. There is always, huge checklist that I have to do that. I have to get stuff done, be, task oriented. And that's where the flip comes because if you're not connected, whether it's your customers, whether it's your supervisor, whether it's people at home, if you're not connected, you're doing a lot of stuff, but you're not really connecting with what they actually want. So I think a much better approach is just take a step back, understand what people are going through, figure out what's the best way of, working together, living together, and even in a coaching conversation, being there. So I think empathy does play that role. So increasingly, I'm seeing that that's something which is really important.
Yeah. Thank you, Smita and Anshu, for your depth, your honesty, and to everyone here, all the amazing coaches, for your beautiful reflections, questions, for showing up with such heart today. Today reminded me that when we lead with empathy, coaching becomes less about guiding and more about honoring where our client is, what are they bringing. And if I talk about my biggest takeaway, it's that presence, not perfection, is what creates transformation. So if we just focus on our presence and how can we be there with our clients in the moment, that is the biggest gift that I can give to our clients. And I hope we each leave with not just the tools, but a deeper reverence for the quiet power of holding space. That's what empathy means to me truly here. So thank you, everyone. And reading some of, yeah, thank you, everyone, for your reflections. I hope you have a great evening, great day ahead, and we'll see you in our next webinar.
So much, Richa,
Thank you
for
so
holding this
much.
space for this conversation. Smita, it's been really nice having this conversation alongside you.
Yes.
And to all our participants, it was amazing getting your views.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Richa. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Anshu, as lovely as always, lovely catching up in this
Yes,
conversation.
let's keep the conversation going. Let's connect on LinkedIn and happy to hear from all of you. What have been your thoughts, your learnings? Let's stay in this conversation. I think it's a wonderful topic.
Yes.
Yes, please share your reflections, thoughts, everyone, and we can keep the conversation going. Stay connected, as Anshu said, on LinkedIn, Coacharya, webinars, wherever. We love seeing you again and again. Take care, everyone.
Take care. See you. Thank
Bye.
you.